Thanks for joining me at Room at the Table with Kimberly Milo, where we talk about all things faith and the journey of walking with Christ. I pray it blesses you. So welcome to the table, and let's dive into my next conversation. Hey, welcome to another episode of Room at the Table with Kimberly Milo. I'm excited for my chat today with my new friend, Laurie Short. Welcome to the show. It's so nice to have you.
Thank you so much, Kimberly.
So let me tell everybody about you because your list is long. Your resume is long. And I first heard you speaking.
It's because I'm old. That's why it's long.
That's not what I meant, but I understand. You have more experience. You're mature. We'll call it mature.
Yes.
I'm getting mature too, whether I want to sometimes with the body changing and things or not.
Exactly.
At church is where I first saw you come and speak, and I was super inspired. And that's when I signed up to like get your emails and get your book and all the good stuff. So I thought you were a great teacher. Let me go into the background about who you are so everybody understands your amazing resume. So Laurie Short is a speaker. She's an author and part of the teaching team at Ocean Hills Covenant Church in Santa Barbara. Is that still where you're?
Yes. I'm not officially on staff, but we have a few of us that come in and preach here and there. Yeah. And so I'm still doing that and very connected to the church. Yeah.
Love it. And you're really good. Like you're really powerful. I can't wait to talk about your book. You are a graduate of Fuller Theological Seminary, and you've spoken to more than 500,000 people at conferences, colleges, churches, and denominational events around the country. And you've been featured on PBS, Focus on the Family, Right Now Media, and more. And then you have a website, which is laurieshort.com. So my gosh, you are so well accomplished. And I have to say, you guys, like this is just one of your books, because I know you do Bible study curriculums. I mean, you do a lot. I know I don't make it look good with all these sticky notes, but we're going to talk about all these things. So I'm going to make it look pretty for you guys. This is the book we're going to talk about today, which is Faith, Doubt, and God's Mysterious Timing, 30 Biblical Insights. And I have to tell you, the way you teach and the insights that you come across are super not just enjoyable for me, because I'm really hungry to make sure the Bible makes sense for people, but you go to a depth and you have a different perspective that really like kind of blows my mind when I'm going through. So I have like so many notes that I'm like, oh my gosh, that was so good. Like no one's ever explained it like that. So I believe you're really doing the right thing in the line of work that you're in. Like God is really,
thank you
for his word to make sense.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I have a passion if it doesn't make sense in your life, then you can read something wonderful, but you're living going, but how does this actually work in my life? And that is my passion, to help people make those connections.
You're really anointed at it. And every other page, I was like, okay, I've read that story in the Bible many times, but I never saw how God was moving in that way. Like I just feel like the Holy Spirit has really designed. I was like, oh, her mind is so necessary for how like other people need to see certain things. Because you can read stories over and over the longer you're a Christian, and they can lose some of their impact. But the way your freshness of the way you see God moving is just really neat. So I really encourage people to go out. And if you don't get this book, do one of her studies. Faith, Doubt, and God's Mysterious Timing is what we'll focus on today. But you've written a new book that's coming out soon. Do you want to tell us a little about the new one?
Yes, the new book is coming out in February, and it's called Tracking God in Your Life. And I'm so excited about this one because every time I speak, people say, your stories are so incredible. And I'm always saying to them, you have them too. I just pay attention to my stories because I do this for a living. And so finally, the Lord just laid on my heart, like to help people find their God story and to make those connections in their life that they haven't spent the time doing. And so the publisher has never published a book like this because it's not just a workbook and it's not just a book. It's a blend, and you will be reading and then doing through the whole book. And I am just thrilled. It's coming out February 10th. So you can be on the lookout for that. But, you can really see in my books that I have carried a similar thread through all of them, which is finding the deeper way that you live your faith and how the word makes sense. Before I wrote this book, I wrote 40 verses to ignite your faith. And that was really doing with verses what this book does with stories in the Bible. And that is just digging into them and saying, have you seen this? Do you hear this as you're reading? Because I think there's so many connections in the Bible. And I think a lot of people are, they want to know the Bible, but it's overwhelming sometimes when you're going through it. It's like, how does this really apply? This happened so long ago and I don't see the connection. So there's so many Bible study tools out there. This is a little bit different in that it really connects with your life. Like, this is what this person went through. And guess what? It's so similar to what you're going through. And I think you'll see that in this book. And Tracking God is kind of the culmination of all I've been doing all these years in the other books, and handing it over to the reader. Okay, you've heard enough from me now. Let's hear from you. And maybe even those readers that want to write a book someday. This would be, the new book is going to be huge for kind of helping you map out and see the connections in different ways. It's very different from a timeline. It's really an experience, a faith fueling experience, we're calling it, because I think you're going to be blown away when you look back on your life through these ways. So that's coming.
I'm really looking forward to that, because the new book is called Tracking God, right?
Mm-hmm. Tracking God in your life. Yep.
Mm-hmm. God in your life. And, I've had people give me the assignment to like write your prayers and then make sure to go back and write, did he say yes or no? Or in what way did he work? And, it's really cool when you do that. When you take the time to do that, you're like, oh, I forgot, I was praying for this a month ago or 3 years ago. But you have to stay on it, and you have to remember you were in there, and it has to be part of your daily practice to really keep it going. So what I like about this new book experience that you're going to release is it will all be confined in there.
Yes. It will be your book as much as mine. And then at the end, there's even a whole page where there's stones that you will put something in from each chapter that was, the place where God met you the most. And the chapters are very different. I'm super excited. It's very creative in the approach. I think it will surprise people. It's not just, your timeline of when you went to church for the first time or did those things. It's really seeing your story in the way God has been moving, and in closed doors as well as open doors, and timing and coincidences, in the pain that maybe became something in your life. All of the chapters have an insight that I think will be really new and fresh and exciting and really faith producing, to know that you have such a personal God who's been paying attention when you didn't even know he was, so anyway, I'm super excited about that. And I think what this book does is it really points you to people in the scriptures that got me starting to think about this, that we all have a story, and how these stories connect with your story and give you something to understand God differently in their story, and then making that connection with yours. So.
Right. And I have to say, it's just really refreshing to hear some of the stories for experienced Christians, to hear them, like I said before, in a fresh way, in a new way, and go, wow, how did I miss that? And
totally. Yeah.
It's a hope for people who are starting their journey to realize, like, look, it can get stagnant, or we don't feel things at different times in your faith where you're like, oh, I'm on fire. And then, a few months later, like, oh, I feel like I don't have any revelation.
Where is he? Yeah. Yeah.
Still here. I don't feel anything. I feel kind of flat. But that's just part of being in relationship. You go through that with your friends. You go through that in your marriage. Like, that's just part of being in a relationship with God. So it was fun for me to read this book and be like, wow, like, because I think you start craving that. You want another perspective. Like hearing the Christmas story, and you hear it every year, and you think, okay, is the pastor going to have a different angle? Because you start hearing the same thing. So anyway, before we dive into, why you wrote that book, how it came together, and the kind of the layout of the book, maybe you could answer a couple like kind of light questions for me. So pick a number between 1 and 10.
Okay. 7.
7. Okay. 7 is, what is your guilty pleasure?
My gosh, I can say it like without even thinking. Bread. I love bread. I love bread so much. And everybody who knows me knows that. And in particular, bread dipped in olive oil. That is just like
Yeah.
to die
Oh,
for. So,
yeah. You
yep.
ever put
Yep.
salt on it? I do olive oil and salt.
I have had that. That's not my regular practice with bread,
okay.
but the oil is for sure. I'm not like, I know a lot of people love butter on their bread or just plain. I just love it dipped in olive oil.
You must have a good olive oil then, because if you like doing that, it's like, it makes a difference. Yeah.
I'm a connoisseur. It's got to be California olive oil or like imported from Italy or something, no. And I think, I fool myself into thinking that it's actually good for me because the olive oil is actually something that you should be consuming. So I just dip bread in it and consume the olive oil. So anyway,
any carb will do.
Yeah, exactly. Totally. Yeah.
Okay. And then another question I heard from John Eldredge. Do you know who he is? I heard him. He asked us on a podcast. And you can go deep end or shallow end. It could be heavy or not so heavy. To know you right now in this moment in time in your life or today is to know what?
To know that right now I'm living in real time what I'm going to release in February, which is just God meeting me in this process of getting ready to release what I think is going to be a gift to people, more than really a book. My book, read my book. This one is really your book. And to watch God putting together the pieces, because I've prayed that this can get out and really get out to people who need to know that there is a God who is paying attention to them. It's not political. It's not denominational. It's universal. It's like you have been created by someone who loves you and is paying so much attention to you. And to watch God meet me right now in so many different ways, like surprising me every day. So that, I think, to know me right now is to know that I'm actually living these things. I'm not just removed from them and writing them and, hoping other people. It's like, no, I am living this. So
good. I love that. So you're really experiencing your own writings. You're wanting to like not be hypocritical. You're wanting to like be in it with.
Yes. And really experiencing God, back in the 90s, and I was alive then. So I remember them, but there was this big workbook and it was called Experiencing God. And a lot of people were doing it. And it was much more workbook form than my book is going to be, but it became a movement. And that really is what I'm hoping this next book will be, is like a movement, an experience. It's not just you're reading this book, but you're actually doing it and you're experiencing. And I think what it will give you then is the ability to see God as you look back and see things, you're going to be able to see things in your present and have more patience and understanding and possibly look deeper into things. So I'm just excited. And in the meantime, actually doing that very thing, which is so precious to me, that God is meeting me, the author, at this time. So he's real. That's what I want to say to people. He really is real. So
yeah, that's so good. That's so inspiring. I love it. I can't wait to talk about this book, but just before we dive into how, you went to seminary. I mean, you obviously Christ, you've been walking with him for a long time. Were you born into this, or tell us your story?
So, I mean, I have a very interesting testimony. I think part of the reason that I'm able to speak to different denominations and different people that worship in different places is that I was baptized in the Serbian Orthodox Church as a baby. My grandparents were, my grandfather in particular came over at 19 and he had $1 in his pocket, and he was an immigrant who spoke no English, but he was Serbian Orthodox, and he met my grandmother who was younger than him, but was also 100% Serbian. And they were like missionaries for the Serbian Orthodox Church. They planted several churches. So it was very important to them. And so I grew up in a faith community, but it was a little bit distant in terms of like my real life. You know, we always believed in God, but it was my senior year that I always share my testimony that I was dating this guy for 3 weeks, which was the average length of most of my high school relationships. But it happened to be a time when his birthday was happening. And just to show you my level of spirituality, I wanted to give him a keg party at my house. And he said that he promised his young life leader that he would go to this camp up in Forest Home, which is in Southern California. And I said, well, then, of course, I'm going to go with you, you know? And so, you know, I went because of my boyfriend. We were making out in the bus the whole way there. And I was blown away how God met me through the speaker. I don't even remember his name, but he talked about this personal relationship that I could have with this God that I always believed in, but I knew I didn't have that. And so that was sort of the icing on the cake, was saying yes, welcoming Jesus into my heart. So I really see now, looking back, the continuum of God, you know, even as a baby, being baptized by the priest in the Serbian Orthodox Church, and then, you know, coming to personal faith my high school years. And then after that, really never had an intention of going into the ministry. I never saw women in the ministry. I loved working with high school kids, but I was going to be an actress. That's what I was going to do.
Wow.
I know. And you can see how well that career's going. But I went to UCLA and I majored in theater arts. And then as I started volunteering on the side in church and with high school students, I thought, well, maybe I'll be a high school drama teacher. And just slowly but surely, God open the doors. I always say, you know, for me, it wasn't a lightning bolt, like I'm going to go in the ministry. I just found myself doing more ministry and really thinking deeply about life. Like, what do I want to do? What is my passion? Like, what do I want my life to mean? And I was finding so much meaning from working with these kids and watching their lives change. And then you know, again, just slowly but surely, I was an assistant to the youth pastor. And then I ended up getting asked to take a temporary position. And then from there, I became the youth pastor because the guy that was in the position moved to a different position in the church. And I stayed there 6 years. That was in Berkeley. And by then I finally said, well, I guess I'm in the ministry. But when I went to seminary, it was really to just get to know God's word, to get to know the Bible. And I had never really studied the Bible. I didn't know a lot about it. So it was an incredible experience for me to be at Fuller Seminary and get my master's. And then a really groundbreaking thing that happened to me is I got involved with Youth Specialties, which was a national organization that trained youth workers. And they really were looking for a woman. It was all men on the team, and they were great speakers, great communicators. And eventually I got on the team and pretty much learned everything I know about speaking from this team. Yeah, they were huge in my life. And so,
and what was that called?
Youth Specialties, which it's not really, I don't even think, I'm not sure if it exists as an entity anymore. We actually just had a reunion. It was so wonderful to see some of those people, but so many of them are still in ministry. Jim Burns has Homeward Ministries. He's a former Youth Specialties person. Doug Fields, I was on the team with. I wrote books with Doug. And Duffy Robbins, he's teaching youth ministry, but he was on the team. And Ridge Burns used to be the head of Forest Home. And Ray Johnston was with Youth Specialties, and he's the pastor of Bayside and Sacramento. I mean, there's incredible people that were a part of this. And so it was a privilege to be, and I wrote 13 books in youth ministry. And one of them was called Help, I'm a Small Group Leader. And it was a huge ministry for me, training small group leaders. And I really thought that was going to be all that I would do in terms of ministry. But then when my life fell apart, and then I got called to this church in Santa Barbara, and then I really felt God call me to different books. I mean, I was like, if I'm going to write, now I'm going to write about life, because I feel like I've now that my life has fallen apart, I feel like I can, you know, had just was in my late 40s, and I just thought, now I feel like I have something to say. And it's really hard to make the transition between one kind of book to another kind of book. So that for me was just a big hurdle. But I had an agent that I actually got from Jim Burns. He's given me so much in my life, and he believed in me, and so he pitched my books to publishers, and eventually, slowly but surely, I entered this new realm. And I've written, this will be my 6th book coming out, and they're all Christian life books. And so I always want to tell people, like, if you feel this passion, you've got to do that thing inside of you, because if you just do what's easier, what you just, everybody expects or whatever, if you're in it, even if the doors are closing or hard or whatever, you've got to just stay with what you feel that passion, and however big your audience is, really. And so, it's so funny because I sort of am new in the women's ministry. I'm kind of just in the last 8-9 years, I've been speaking at women's things. I never did that before. I spoke at colleges, conferences, churches, festivals, all the young person things,
Yeah.
And then,
did you have to transition? Did you have to, excuse me, I'm just curious, because you said that transition was tricky for writing.
Well,
for speaking, was it also like,
it's so funny. What I did learn is that women are a very generous audience. I feel like they, speaking where I did, to use where I always say, if you really want to learn how to be a good speaker, speak to teenagers. They're not listening. Exactly. You're going to be looking like, I go into college chapels and I'm like, I'm going to get that person in the back row who's doing their homework right now, thinking they're going to be bored.
I love.
And so that's been a gift, because I think women have been a delight to speak to. And I feel very like these are my people, because I know so many of the struggles and the things that women have gone through. But I'm also, I love to preach. I love to preach to both men and women. So I still love that. And I'm grateful for my background, because it really helped. It trained me to be able to speak to both men and women. And so I know that that's my calling, and the writing kind of came along with that. It's harder for me to write than speak. And a lot of times when you're reading my books, you can hear my voice, because I'm very conversational in the books. And I think you're usually either a writer who speaks or a speaker who writes. And I think I would be a speaker who writes. So,
yeah, well, I really resonated with your writing style. I found it easy to digest and absorb, which I'm always really appreciative. Because if something is a little too heady or cognitive, you have to spend a lot of time reading it, and it might be really rich and deep, but then you have to go slower. So I found your book to be easy to absorb, and the way you have it formatted is in, like, each chapter has 3 sections, basically, right?
Stories, 3 different Bible stories that give an aspect of the chapter title, which is the big idea.
The big idea. And there's 10 of those, and that's why you have 30 insights.
Yes.
Yeah. But it's so chock full of just different stories in the Bible. Like, I don't even think you repeat one story once. Like, everything is just, all your insights are relevant in different ways to different stories, Old Testament, New Testament. So it's really nice for maybe a newer Christian too, to be able to go, well, I hadn't read that story yet in the Old Testament. And then you always have the scripture in there. But just to touch back on your testimony, so did you have a moment where you kind of felt like Jesus made more sense to you? Because a lot of my guests are, even if they were raised Christian, they kind of stray. And you had made a comment like, oh, we went on to camp and I really wasn't, we were making out with us and we weren't really Christians or whatever. I mean, like, you're not living, and that's normal for teens, I feel like, to a degree. Place. But, like, so then did you go to a Christian college, or, like, when did it become something where you're like, oh, now I want to sink my teeth back in?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, from that point on, I really just, because it's funny, I was sort of raised as a Christian in the 90s, when a lot of people feel, I think now, if they were too constrained, they're like, I need to break out. There's just a movement like that. And then there's also a movement back to conservatism. I mean, I think we're living in a very interesting time.
True. Yeah.
But for me, I never really felt that need because I felt very free. I didn't come from any kind of family that forced anything on me. So I was really doing it for me. And that has lent, and being a youth pastor has lent me to that very strong conviction that you've got to let your kids find their way. And yes, early on in life, you can surround them with good people and you pray for them and you model it. But at a certain time, don't force it because it could have the opposite effect. And it was hard, walking with parents, so many parents through this, and then actually raising a child and watching it in my own home and working at a church while we were raising this child. But I do feel like I never really rebelled. So I only just grew from there. And it was just me getting to know Jesus and my life and sort of allowing him to lead me in areas that I just never imagined for myself. I mean, honestly, I can still remember the conversation with my father, like going to seminary, because he, I was raised in a home where college was paid for and my education, and that was very important to them. But once I decided to get my master's in seminary, I was on my own on that, and I wasn't married. I didn't have, obviously got part of my testimony is I got married way later in life. And so it was kind of like, are you going to be okay? My dad was like, can you pay for this? And so doing it on faith and really just believing that God, just taking it one day at a time. And he always provided, but it was just one door opening and then another, and watching my faith grow and the faith of people around me. I would say my crisis of faith happened when my engagement blew up, because and that's sort of the testimony I'm known for, is that, finally when I was 42, I got engaged, and it was already so late in life. And very public, because I was speaking all over the country, training youth workers. And then, so I was engaged for a year and a half and had the wedding dress and the bridesmaids dresses and the counseling and the, furniture in the home and the whole 9 yards. And then what happened was actually a beautiful story. Two people get back together, because my fiance ended up getting back together with his ex-wife who had left him.
Wow. Oh, wow.
And it all happened when he was deployed for 9 months. She was writing him and having second thoughts. And so they got back together. So here it is, this yay story, for them. And I could not imagine that God thought I was strong enough to play the role that I did in that story, because I definitely made him more attractive to her, because I think she took a look and went, wait a minute, what did I leave behind, And I just, it was that apparent cruelty of God that has led me to these books. I know that God allowed that in my life so that I could have empathy for people who are sitting right now in the wait going, where are you? Why are you allowing this? I have been there. And so that was probably my crisis of faith. But I always say it was kind of a Peter crisis, because if you recall, when Jesus's teachings got really hard, people were leaving. They were like, okay, you know what? He's not what we thought, and I'm out of here. And Jesus turns to Peter, and I think James and John were there, but he says to Peter, like, what about you? Are you going to leave too? And he said, where would we go? Where would we go? And that's what I felt. I was like, I'm already in. I'm like speaking. I am leading other people. I am in ministry. And now you have, blown up my life. And I'm telling you, Kimberly, that was so powerful in my walk with God and in my public, ministry, which was speaking and teaching. And I was like, I had it out with God. I was like Job, that's why I relate to Job. Job opens the book because I'm like, if I tell people what has happened in my life, people are going to walk away from you. That's what I said to God. And I really heard him say, because if you know me as a communicator or an author, you know that I'm very real. I'm not going to fake it. I'm not going to be living one way. And then you're going to find out like I didn't really believe or whatever. So I was like, I can't fake it. And I really felt God say, just tell your story. And that's when I developed what I call the middle of the story testimony, which is you are sharing before the ring and the person and the resolve. You are sharing your story and getting to the end of it and wanting. The first time I always tell the story, the first time I did was right after my broken engagement. I was still in tears.
You talk about that in the and you talked about that in church. That was one of the things. And I just had such a heart for you because, you know, I've seen women, they want, if they want to be married and then everyone around them is getting married and it's not happening for them.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a longing and it's a heartbreak because of course there's you start to worry about what's wrong with me and, you know, all the stuff that goes with that, especially in our culture, which we kind of idolize, you know, marriage and relationship.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And I understand that. Like, I feel like I totally get that. And it's not healthy, but it's also part normal because you want to share your life with, you know, God's plan is for us to be with all those things. Yeah. But you talk about that in the book. And when you talked about it at church, I just thought, gosh, this is such an important message, you know, for women who are feeling not good enough, being by themselves. And where is God in this? And there is no God. But man, you're just really raw and honest with it. And it's important. People have to hear. Yeah. So when you just made the comment about you're already in it, you're already knee deep in a relationship with God, was there a part of you that was like, when you said there's no getting out of it, did you kind of want to walk away?
Well, I mean, for sure, I kind of did the Job thing. I mean, I was like, I don't understand you right now, you know, but I just was like, if you still work in my life at this point, it's going to be an unbelievable story. You know, it was kind of a dare, really. Like,
yeah,
what could you do? And what was weird is that 4 months, almost to the day that I had my breakup, my mom took my wedding dress. I couldn't even go get my shower gifts. They were still in his garage. She was, you know, back in his life. And so I was just devastated. I could barely get out of bed. And I got a call from John Ireland, who is the pastor up here. And he had heard I got married. I mean, he was like, "Hey, I heard you got married." I'm like, "Nope." And he goes, "Well, that's not why I'm calling. We were praying about this new position at this church I've planted." He was a youth pastor, but he had planted another church. And he said, "And your name came up. I don't know if you're interested." And honestly, Kimberly, I would never have gone had I not been exactly in the situation that I was. But it was too weird, the timing. And that's part of the new book of just, you have to pay attention to timing. And, you know, that's a huge theme in this book. That's where I wrote this book on timing, because I think, you know, when something like that happens, even if it's not what you're looking for, you've got to go, okay, what is this? I mean, if God's in my life and this door is opened, I need to at least check it out. And I had no plans to move or anything like that, but I went up to Santa Barbara and of course I always liken myself. I think I might have even done that in this book, to Ruth, because, you know, just before she left to go, you know, with Naomi, I mean, Naomi said, "You're never going to get married if you follow me, and you have a chance. You should go back to your people." And she was like, "I'm following you because that's my call." Well, when I went up to Santa Barbara, I remember this guy, I was jogging because I used to jog, and he would always, I'd see him walking his dogs, and I was like, "Guess what? I'm moving to Santa Barbara." He's like, "Oh no, there's no single people in Santa Barbara." You know, I might have even shared this when I was sharing at your church, but you know, I mean, it's kind of known as the place of the newlywed and nearly dead. You know, it's like, you're just there. And I will be honest with you, there aren't very many single people up here because it's really expensive.
Yeah.
And there's no nightlife in downtown Santa Barbara. You know, it's not like, oh, you're going to meet, you know, and so I even had a great friend who moved down to San Diego because she was like, there's just, you know, no no real single community here. And so I was like, this is so God to bring me to a place where there's no single people. And then to ultimately, I mean, I dated a lot of wrong people that people were trying to fix me up with and stuff, but to meet a guy who had the same story, his wife left him. And I was like, God, I cannot do this again. You know, my first book, Finding Faith in the Dark, was like, are you kidding me? You're, you know, my heart will not take it. You know, I actually, you know,
wow.
He went back to her 3 times in the course of our dating. 'Cause I was like, you have to be, and he would never have left her. She left him for another guy, but now that I know her and stuff, she was never coming back to him. But I just was so sure that I couldn't do that again, you know, and yet it was my greatest fear. And God wanted to take me through my greatest fear. Can you trust me?
Right. That was going to say, like, but this is the part where I think a lot of people will leave him, but thank God you were rooted enough to know his character.
Exactly.
And so that's what you wrote about in here, is really like who he is and what he could be doing at all these different junctures in your life.
Yes.
And it's, I almost need to read it again because there's just so many times when, I mean, this is the stuff people talk about all the time when they're believers and they're going through different things, easy trials, hard trials, you know, whatever, confusion, doubt about anything, any relationship, work, all the things. But there is a method to how God could be working and most likely is working. And unless you have eyes to see and ears to hear, you're going to be like, there is no God. But when you go through, you know, returning to Christ and returning to study, returning to church, returning to being in fellowship with people going through things, reading books, you start to see like, oh, this is kind of how he works. And that's what this book feels like, is really understanding the way he does things. And the biblical stories, you go, oh, that was like when I went through this. So it's just such a like a manual. Do you know what I mean? Like, and that's cool about this book, is you're like, oh, like that's was happening in the Old Testament. And like, I didn't look at it that way because no one really taught me to look at it that way.
Right.
And I think it's so separated from what's happened in the Bible because, well, one, our culture is so starkly different than the things that they were going through. It's really almost impossible for us to imagine. Like, I think earlier, I don't know, I could be confusing you, but it was either you or another guest had said something to me about how the disciples all died. You know, they were willing to die for their faith. And I mean, yes, we still see that going today. It's happening now in Nigeria, happening around the world still, right? Tragically. But in terms of like, what does that mean? Like, if the disciples were with him and they were like, I'm not going to say I didn't see what I saw. You're going to have to kill me, because it was so real for them. They were willing to lose their life for it. Like, today that would feel like a very strange thing because we don't see miracles happening in front of us, like obvious with Jesus doing them. You know, we see miracles, but we have to make sense of them as God's miracles, whereas they were actually seeing the loaves and the fishes and the healings in front of them. So
I think The Chosen does such a good job of this, in that but you can see how they might see something one day, just like us.
Yes.
But then the next day, something happens where they're like, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense. That's not what we read.
In it. You were in The Chosen as an extra. I saw that.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Well, that is going to be funny because, I mean, not funny. It's the season. Anyway, that's a tangent. I don't know if you want to go on that.
I just want the audience to know, like, well, she's in it. That was her fun pictures you posted that you were, I'm like, oh my gosh, they're actually on the show.
We're extras. So it's really the sea of, it's all up to the cutting room floor. You know, are we going to be in it or not? But the just quickly, the irony is that, Kimberly, we were the crowd who chooses Barabbas. Yeah. Which was, and my husband was in the group, like you know, they divided us from birthdays. Dallas came and talked to us and everything. Like, I know you feel weird about this, but this was the moment in history where your savior so you're playing a part, do not, you know, and so my husband was so like, he was like, crucify. I mean, I was like, and I was supposed to be, my birthday was in the, like, the concern, you're not yelling for Jesus or Barabbas. You're just like, what's going on? So I literally, I mean, I was like channeling my UCLA days, because I'm watching my husband like, what's going on? So if you do see us, you're probably going to see my husband condemning Jesus to the cross. I mean, like, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so crazy. But anyway, it was an amazing,
that's an upsetting, that must have been a hard scene, because
horrible.
I mean, we love Christ, and we're like, I would never pick
yes,
Barabbas.
Exactly.
How do you say his name?
Barabbas. Yeah.
Barabbas.
Yeah.
But can you explain, because not everybody listening to this is going to know all these stories. So we've touched on Job, we've touched on Barabbas, Barabbas, however you say his name, and then Ruth. So just really quickly, so people understand who these important people are.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I opened the book, The Faith, Doubt, and God's Mysterious Timing, with the story of Job, because I think Job is where you go when you just feel like, what are you doing? And why is this happening to me? I don't deserve this. This is, or whatever. Someone's left you, someone's done something, any major suffering. Yes. Because
he had them all. He had them all.
Yes. Yeah. And I love the story because, Job never knows chapter 1, but the reader does. And I feel like this is a huge thing that, I operate on the long story that God is weaving in your life. And what Job never saw was the beginning, which was a conversation between God and Satan, and knowing that God was actually on Job's side. That's how the whole thing started. Like, Satan was the one going, well, if you take this away, he's not gonna, what was God left with? Either saying, yeah, you're right, I don't know if Job will, so I guess we better not, I better just, and so God reluctantly agrees with Satan, because he thinks Job is strong enough, and that he's gonna, he's believing in Job. And he also says, you must spare his life. But, everything that happens to Job is so unfair, because he's such a, he's not perfect, but he's trying his best. And
he's righteous. He's trying to live.
And then he's got the church, the friends that are like, first they're with him and, oh gosh, this is so terrible. But then they start going, well, maybe you did do something. And that, unfortunately, I feel like there is a strain of thinking that's like, what are you doing to allow this or create this in your life?
You talk about this, just to pause you there. You talk about this, that God is in the heart, how something didn't happen to you because of God's displeasure. And so that's in chapter 7. So can I bring that up? Because that was one of my notes. Okay. So in chapter 7, okay, I'm going to read some of the stuff that you say here, because this chapter is called God is in the heart. And it's one of my favorite chapters, because it's about how do we kind of make sense of it. What is he doing? When we are on page 128, you say, when we are called to follow God into hardship, it's difficult not to look at other people's lives and wonder why they seem to have it easy. We may question why God is doing this to us, but suffering makes its way into every life. It just comes in different packages. We can't compare ourselves to others, especially through staged glimpses on social media, and assume we have a correct assessment of their life. Jesus' words to Peter, and earlier you were referencing Peter, one of the disciples, jolt us to stop focusing on others and turn our attention back to ourselves. If I want him to remain alive until I return, what is that to you? You must follow me. So you're introducing the concept that God is very aware of the hardship you're going through.
Yeah.
Stop looking at everyone else. So even Job, in your righteousness and how well you've lived, stop looking at maybe your next door neighbor who's a sinner and getting a lot of good stuff. Stop looking at that. Just pay attention to what am I doing with you? But then he's suffering so deeply.
Yeah.
Would you allow this?
Well, I mean, I think Peter and John, who are two of Jesus's disciples, and I think you see this in The Chosen. I really recommend that for just a visual.
Yeah.
I mean, my husband and I just have deep spiritual experiences every time we're watching it. It's so really well done. But Peter's the one that gets the name. He's the rock. And you can kind of see the other disciples going, okay, and then John and James sort of jockey for position at some point. They ask him, it's so inappropriate and awkward when they say, can we sit in your right and left? You really get a sense of that. But here we are now in this conversation of post-resurrection. Jesus is coming to Peter and saying, basically feed my sheep, giving him a chance to undo his denial 3 times. He says, do you love me? Do you love me?
Know him. Right.
And then, he says that one day you used to dress yourself and go where you wanted, but one day somebody else will take you where you do not want to go. And I've given talks on that verse because that is not a happy verse. That's verses in the Bible that you don't want. And what's so fascinating is that Peter immediately, his response is, what about him?
Yes.
I mean, that's the first thing he says because John is walking by. So now we have the reverse. Like John maybe looked at Peter and go, why is he the rock? Why am I not the rock? And you can almost, what I love about scripture is I'm always looking in the stuff, but you can see John like going, and the disciple who Jesus loved. He writes about himself as the disciple who Jesus loved. And the disciple who Jesus loved got to the tomb first. It's like you see the humanness. If you look, you can see the humanness, but so John, now is going to live till old age. Peter's not. Peter's going to be crucified upside down. And John is going to be the one that is on Patmos and, writing the book and be the elder and all the things, Revelation, but in that moment, what I think God is saying is you are going to live your story. And the story that we live on earth, this is huge in our faith. If we understand this, is only part of our story. If we truly believe that one day we're going to be with Jesus and going to be resurrected, then this story on earth, no matter how long it is, no matter how unfair, no matter how much you get or don't get, I'll never have a child. I wanted that so much. I did raise a child and I am a mom, but it didn't come in the package that I wanted. And that's a loss that I carry. I didn't get to experience that here on earth. And people will look at me and think, oh my gosh, she has such a beautiful marriage. Look at her and look at how all that happened. But nobody dreams to marry at 49. There isn't a girl alive. When I share my testimony to college students, you can see them go to prayer like, no, God, please. They love my story and I'm only telling it because it's weird and I got married so late and I wouldn't even be telling it if I got married in my 20s and have my kids and all the things. But that's the thing. The loss in your life is what creates the testimony in your life. And so God is in the heart. Like your heart is going to be your testimony. And that is really the theme of my life. I always say, like, even, just thinking about the whole story, why people bail on God, Kimberly, is because they think God is done. But if you wake up, this is my saying that I'm known for. If you got up this morning and you're still breathing, God is not through with your story. It might look like a chapter is over, a thing is over, a marriage is over, an ending happened, someone died, but God's not done if you're still here.
Yeah.
And he'll take you home when it's time,
That is so good. I mean, everything you're saying, I'm like, preach, go. Like
I'm always preaching. Yeah.
We're at church. And this is, especially for newer believers, I think it's, you don't know necessarily that. So you don't see, oh, I got through that and he's still working with me. You kind of say this on page 129 in that same chapter of God is in the Hard. You say, as new believers, we thrill when God delivers just what we want at exactly the time we want it. As we mature in our faith, we understand God's love is deeper than our wants and isn't measured by things going our way. In fact, according to the passages you had just read about Peter, sometimes God's love is experienced most profoundly when things don't go our way. And you reference it to being like a parent of a child and say, only when your children become adults will they see the wisdom and love in what you did.
Yes.
It's not hard to imagine that our Heavenly Father brings us to maturity the same way. I loved that analogy that, even if you're not a parent, you understand that little kids
Yes.
can't know what you're doing
No.
until they get older and go, oh, I was just so luckily she protected me from that because I didn't know what I was doing. And that's exactly what God is doing with us. But we think we know it all because we're adults.
That's right. And even to think even more deeply that you are actually loving your child more with the no's because you're making a sacrifice. You have to experience that they won't understand, that they're going to, I mean, I think of God, how tender, it makes me almost cry to think of how he felt when I was sobbing, going, what are you doing to me? When he knew, because he's outside of time, he knows what's going to happen. And he knew that one day I would look back and thank him that he spared me that marriage that would not have been nearly as good as the one he had for me. Now, I could have had a child at that time because I was young, possibly. So there were losses to that. And I always say, you've got to be willing to let go of your timelines and your goals for your life here on earth to live the story that God has for you and
That's
to be
so
brave,
powerful.
That
is so powerful, and to be brave and courageous, trusting him. But if you don't know him, you can't trust.
Exactly.
If you don't know him and you haven't spent time, it could be years or weeks or months or however long it takes you to see the goodness and the consistency, the faithfulness of how he's caring for you. You don't know that. It takes a journey with him. And that's why I'm always encouraging people, like, keep going. Like, there's more to learn. There's more to know. You're never done learning. Yeah, we're just never done learning. Then you say on page 130 to close that chapter out. And I was like, wow, like I write all over my books. You're referring to another part. And Job is in this because we were talking about Job and we were talking about his story. He lost his home. He lost his children. He lost his health. Like, he was going down and he thought, I've been so good, Lord. Why have you left me? So you reference him here. You say the truth that we discover from Hagar, a female story, a woman suffering, Job and Peter, is that the call to hardship is not a sign of God's displeasure. And I really want to camp on that for a second, because people I know in my life who have been through some of the worst pain, in their rawness of trying to make sense of how God allows such suffering, that they naturally have the question, and so have I in my other trials that aren't nearly as bad. Did I do something? Is God unhappy with me? Is he punishing me? Was I not righteous enough? Did I fail him? But what you say is, it means that God has plans for what he wants to do in and through the story of our lives that only suffering and hardship can write. Many of us realize that we touch others more through our pain rather than through our prosperity. We immediately connect to people who have experienced our same pain, and God often uses that pain to be a healing agent in other people's lives. Shared pain brings people together. We see it happen in AA meetings, cancer wards, and grief groups. And it's through Jesus' suffering that hurting people connect most deeply to God, because Jesus suffered. He knows exactly what it feels like in the flesh.
Yeah.
And this is what's so beautiful. And this is what I really hope people hear from this. This is why I want people to come to Christ and learn about him. Our God came to earth and suffered and died to show us hardship is not something to be feared or avoided. Like, that's profound. The resurrection reveals that hardship can be entered and endured because it has been overcome. That is so good and so powerful, and so much hope that we should not be freaking out over every trial and worry and heart going through, because one, we know whose we are. The Lord has overcome it, and he died to show us, like, you can survive this. I'm right there in it. Like, it's just so beautiful. The way you wrote it is just so beautiful.
Thank you. Well, it's something I truly believe. And yet I am just as much a yeller and a screamer and a crier as that. I'm a 4 on the Enneagram. So I feel it all. There are times when I can write books like this. I can speak on this. And then I'm like, where are you? What are you doing? I'm just, it's like a marriage, a good marriage has it all. You do everything. You are able to share honestly and say hard things, and you're able to reach the heights because of that. I mean, there is no resurrection without death. there is no resurrection without death. And so you have to go through the pain to really understand what the joy is. And that's the part that people get stuck there.
Yeah.
You know, I always say it's okay. I mean, however long you have to be that way, God's okay with it. He can endure that. But if you can just stay in it, don't leave. Don't leave the story.
Yeah. And what you just said about the death, like sometimes the death of whatever that issue is, or the dream you wanted. Yeah. You write about this in another chapter. I have 3 chapters that I highlighted, and this one's called Forcing Your Way Can Complicate Your Life. And this was like, so again, like so good about how we are really partnering with him and to stop resisting the hard sometimes that's happening. You write on page 48, life with God is a partnership, and we have control of our part in the relationship. We continue to choose, and then there's a couple sentences, and then I highlighted, we continue to choose throughout our lives. So this is a choice, whether we will go at the pace or in the direction God leads. And then you say our acceptance or resistance to the way God leads will set the course for the way we live our life. Like, so good how we fight it, we resist it, we try to control it, we don't understand it. And the less you know his character, the harder this will be. Absolutely. In my opinion, because I didn't know him for a good portion of my life. And then when I started getting to know him, I was like, oh, like I actually have some control in my part of how I trust him.
Yes. And you know, I just did a reel on Instagram on this, on my favorite verse, which is in 40 verses, Isaiah 50:10, which is, let the one who walks in the dark, who has no light, trust in the name of the Lord and rely on your God. And I was stuck there in that verse and ashamedly said, I never read what came next, which is so true for so many of the, you know, I get so much out of context. As soon as somebody gives me the verse or passage I'm preaching on, I'm looking at what's around it now, because you just can get so much out of that. And the next verse says, but woe to you who light your own fires and provide your own torches. This is what you will receive. You will lie down in torment. And I made a joke about, like, that's not a verse you see on social media. That's not something that you know.
Because he's confronting us in that, saying,
well, I think and as much as, it could be read as confrontation, or it could be read as we torment ourselves because we make happen what we want to happen. That's
right. We want to be our own God. We want to be right.
And it's like, okay, I don't care anymore about waiting for the right guy. I need to get married. I want to have a baby, or whatever it is you want. God will let you follow your way, and he doesn't abandon you. I really want to make that clear. Like, if you've made a wrong decision, you're listening to this podcast right now and going, oh, well, that's why my whole life is no. God is a redeemer over everything. I mean, he's a redeems. I mean, I just love Abraham and Sarah's story for that. I mean, Sarah said, we're done waiting. Obviously Hagar is here, and she has her own story that's also in this book.
She's the Hagar's midwife.
Here. She's the midwife. This happened all the time in the Old Testament. Doesn't happen now, but it did. And so, you know, obviously we're supposed to have the child through her, and was miserable from the day Hagar got pregnant. Sarah was so miserable. She was doing things that were so out of her character, whatever she was doing to, mistreating her enough that she ran away. It's not Hagar's fault. I mean, she just was doing what they told her to do. And so, And then even Abraham is going before God going, if only Ishmael, we did this, Lord, bless this that we did. And he's going, okay, I will give Ishmael his story, but you are still going to have this child, And so I love that whole thing, because you see God working with people who are imperfect. And that's what we are. And so, but what the verse gives us, that verse, Isaiah 50:11, is the warning before we're about to do something. Like, if you can just say, I want to do this so much. I mean, I can't tell you how many times, like, I'd be sitting with a friend in a bar waiting for dinner or whatever, talking to a guy that was really cute and thinking, why am I waiting? for this. Look, I could get a guy, I mean, I'm, whatever, just kind of, I'm going to, Lord, you're not doing this. And my years are passing and I'm getting older and I'm not, and we talk ourselves into things. And I don't know one person who's glad when they do that. I mean, there's always some level of, I wish I didn't do that.
That's such a good point. That is such a good point. How much easier could things be in hindsight if we had just calmed ourselves down?
That's right. And I mean, I even just when my husband and I got married, and there was still this part of me that was, people were like, I think you're going to be like Sarah. You're going to have, my husband had a vasectomy. We're like, should we reverse it and maybe try, or even like adopt a baby or whatever. And then it was like clear as day that God was like, the child that you're supposed to raise is right here. I mean, I want to cry just, and he you are going to do something in his life that will change his life. And now that he's a Marine at 22 and leading worship in Yuma, Arizona, leading worship.
Your stepson.
And he's my stepson, but he calls me mom, I mean, and he has a biological mom and she is still his biological mom and always will be. But I got this opportunity to step into what God called me to do with my husband. And so it's the giving in and the sacrifice and the saying, I'm called to this. It's not exactly what I pictured or thought I wanted, but there's joy in it and there will be joy in it. I say to women, if your desire is to get married, you hold on to that. God sees that. You just have to let go of the timeline and when it's going to happen. I don't know when or how, but if you continue to have that desire, I know women who got married for the first time in their 60s. God is not operating on the same timeline that we are. And that's the biggest, and that's why I wrote this
right. Book. I was going to say, I mean, I was just going to ask you, and then how do we tell people to do that? And I'm like, well, that's what this is. Like, yes, this book gives you the faith and the stories to go, okay, just calm down. Maybe God's doing this, like I need to be a little more trusting and not so freaked out and controlling and searching and all that. It's like, get into your faith, go to church, start reading a study Bible, which has the notes and the narrative of what's happening in the culture at the time and what things mean. Like start taking steps to make sense of, who designed you, because
have friends in your life that are walking with God who can encourage you to hold on. That is a huge thing.
Right.
So, we could probably end with that.
I know. Talk and talk. I just want to say another chapter and then we'll start closing. But chapter 8, when in doubt, look at Jesus. This was such a beautiful, it's towards the end of the book, but it was just such a beautiful reminder of like the purity of who Jesus is. And when you get confused, I just thought there was some really good stuff in here about, like you said, to look at Christ. Page 134. For every confusing scripture passage you read, Jesus's life and ministry is where to go with your questions. For every leader who disappoints you, Jesus is the leader you can look to and trust. So whether that's a boss, maybe your parents, whoever is in that authority figure. For every piece of evidence that seems to point to God's absence or neglect, Jesus's stories are the place to find help for our questions. When we see how Jesus loved, spoke, interacted, and healed, we find our way back to God. I just thought that was such a good catch-all for people that are like, well, the Bible's confusing, or, I don't understand this or that. It's like, when in doubt, just go back to the 4 Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and see what he said and what he did. You might not understand all of it, but everything is right there. To be a Christian, Jesus is who we follow,
and too, the stories that I selected for this book, but there's so many more, but in the story, you see Jesus doing confusing things. At first, you don't get why he's in the boat asleep when there's a storm and the disciples are about to die or drown, and how many people have felt like God was asleep in their storm, I mean, I've used those stories to preach because it's just Jairus and the bleeding woman. I mean, that story, there is so much in that story, and that
I'm like, that was really one of the ones where I was like, oh my gosh, she's like Blowing my mind.
So it's so good and so layered. And when we're looking one dimensional at God, why is he doing this? He's doing this, and that's why I think parenting is such a good parallel, because there are so many times you're doing things that look cruel or don't make sense or whatever. And it's because you are willing to sacrifice being liked right now because you love your child so much and you want the best for them. And so you're going to say, well, they're not going to understand. They're going to hate me right now. And that's how I feel so much like God did. And I just saw Jesus do that all over the scriptures. I mean, he just is. And The Chosen, I think, really shows that,
way too making sense. Well, and the last thing I want to end on here is that always you get more than what you ask for. That's what's in this chapter. When in doubt, look at Jesus, that he's working more than what even you could be asking for. And this paragraph I thought was really good. Jesus reveals that while we are captivated by healing that's physical, because so much of us want to see a physical miracle, change this, heal that, our health, things like that, or give me the money. We want a physical, tangible thing. God prioritizes healing that is internal. Physical healing is dramatic and miraculous, while spiritual healing is often inward and invisible. And our tendency is to weigh the impact by what we see. However, the real scale should measure what endures the longest, and spiritual healing outlasts our bodies. Our greatest healings take place under the surface, and they are what lead to significant and lasting change. The result of spiritual healing is what happens in and through people after the healing takes place. So I just thought that was such a good reminder that the Lord is after so much more than what we can see and measure and touch and feel. He wants our spiritual health, sometimes more than our physical health. And that was a beautiful reminder for me to remember. It's always a bigger.
Well, it's hard because of all those things, but when you really stop and think about it, when you have that kind of inward spiritual healing, it impacts your relationships, it impacts your life, it impacts your decisions, it impacts so much more of your life. Now, the physical healing gives you ease. I don't have to suffer anymore, which is wonderful. I mean, all of us want that.
Of course,
but the other leads to so much more health in your life.
Yeah.
That's where you got to think deeper with God. You've got to really see. And that's what I try to do, is just help people see these things, because I think they're universal truths that people believe in, but they
I really agree. This book is really meant for, I think, all of us, first of all, and especially people who maybe have struggle seeing the bigger picture, or they don't have as much experience, or they just need another viewpoint. Like I said, there were many times I was like, wow, I've never read that. I've never heard that preached. It's a really great book. I highly encourage people to get it. And I can't wait for your next one. I'm so excited about that.
Thank
so
you.
Get ready to close. Where can people buy all of your materials?
Yes. Okay. Well, two things I want to say about this. First is, if you get this book, read it devotionally, in the sense of, don't try to digest too much of it, as we've seen with what you've just read. I mean, you could sit in a couple of those sentences for a while. You probably should just read a story in the morning or whenever you have your time with the Lord or whatever, and let that piece of it, minister to you. The other thing is, I have a video study that goes with it. So it's a great book to do in small groups, a great book, because the study goes with it, and you can get it on Right Now Media or my website. So that is one place you can get all my studies on my website, but Amazon, all my books are on Amazon. Just look up Laurie Pullett Short. And then you can find me on Instagram. I post reels, Laurie P. Short. And also my author page on Facebook, Laurie P. Short. And I'm just about, this is very exciting, next week is 3 months to the day for when my book comes out. And I have 2 young women who are working with me, and there's going to be little surprises and video pieces. And I'm going to be giving things that are going to be in this new book. So you may want to follow one of those pages or something like that. But
that's coming, to see what's coming. Right? For the book.
Exactly. So Laurie P. Short is really the place to look
and
up.
If they want you to come speak at their church, they go through your website because you do sermons.
Yes, I do speak a lot and love it. So yeah.
Okay, so I always ask my guests this question. The podcast is called Room at the Table, and that is meant for everyone who is curious or wants to maybe understand more about Christ. It doesn't matter your sin, your doubt, your anger, mistakes. There's room for all of you at the table. So I ask every guest, what genre of people, or as maybe there's one person in your life, who do you wish really understood that even for them, there's room at Jesus's table for them?
Well, I think the crux of my ministry is that if you've been disappointed by God, or you're not even sure he exists because of the things that have happened to you, there's room at the table for you. And you just need to come with all of your doubts and all of your questions and just sit and wait at the table for what God will show you in time. And it probably won't happen on your timeline. It's certain nothing in my life has happened on my timeline. But if you stick with it, he will show up. I can promise you. He will show up, and you might not be even looking for where he is. And I think this next book is really going to help people do that better. It's going to give you some tools to do that. So, but there's room at the table for you.
I love that. And who of us has not had the disappointments and the loss and the confusion and the doubt? So it's all of us. He wants a relationship with all of us. What a exciting and informative and educational hour it's been. Thank you so much for coming on and just being a teacher. To everybody just have a closer understanding of who Jesus is. So I'm so grateful, and I can't wait to get your next book. So it's been a total
thank
joy.
you.
Thank you so much.
If you're enjoying the show, remember to share it with a friend. In addition, please like, follow, rate, and review it on Apple, Spotify, or YouTube. This really helps listeners find us. You can follow us on Instagram at Room at the Table for You, or Facebook at Room at the Table with Kimberly Milo. And to connect with me personally, email me at roomatthetable4you@gmail.com. Thanks again for listening, friends. And remember, there's always room at the Lord's table. He loves you, and so do I.